Hello everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to FunAhead TV. Today, we're working on that freaking car, and I'm about to turn off my dehumidifier. That's better. Alright, walking back to the front of the car. Let's talk about what we're doing today. Actually, it's a fairly big project. So the other day, I was walking. The other day, I was driving my beloved 5 Series. This is a 2007 BMW 530xi wagon. It is the E61 generation with the 6-speed manual, mind you. It's the fun version. I was coming out of a stoplight, and I noticed all of a sudden there was a ton of vibration coming from the engine. The engine was running fine, however the engine was just sending all sorts of vibration up into the chassis of the car. I immediately thought, hey, I think one of my engine mounts just failed. So after I got home that day, because I did drive it home, it drove fine with the exception of having a lot of vibration up through the chassis. Got home, looked at the engine mounts, oh, yep, they are pretty collapsed. So I ordered some engine mounts. Well, I got the car up in the air to start changing the engine mounts. I took the undercovers off. I took the strength or the rigidity plate off. And as I was lowering the rigidity plate or the strength plate or whatever the heck that thing is called, I realized that there was a ton of thick grease on the upper side of that thing. Now, BMWs are known to leak oil, and they leak oil all the time. It's just a regular thing that they do. But they don't leak thick grease. And I said, self? That's not right. Something happened here. So I looked up and, well, let me show you what I found. Alrighty, now here we are under the car. Here's the transmission. There's the bottom of the engine. I know everything is covered in oil. That is due to a faulty rear main seal. Fortunately for us, or unfortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, we are now in the position of needing to do a transmission out job. Now, you astute observers out there are maybe able to differentiate all of the oily, leaky mess from what the problem is here. The problem is in the frame right now. Any guesses? Can you see where it is? Yep, that right there. That is the source of my thick grease, and that is where the engine meets the transmission here. There is a small view hole, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, that normally allows you to look up in and see, the flywheel. Normally, there should not be any thick grease coming out of that hole. However, what failed resulted in this grease, and that is the dual mass flywheel completely exploded on me. Of course, now is going to require a transmission out job to be able to change out the dual mass flywheel. And while we're in there, of course, we're going to do clutch, pressure plate, slave cylinder. Of course, we're going to do throw out bearing, as many seals as we can. Rear main seal, like I mentioned. All of these things that are while you're in there jobs, we're going to get in there and get really weird with it all. Oh, flex plate for the drive shaft. Tons of while you're in there opportunity, as you can see. So that's the project at hand. For those of you who are wondering, what the heck is a dual mass flywheel? Well, let's talk about that now. All right, now this here is a dual mass flywheel. This is not a BMW dual mass flywheel. This is actually a flywheel out of my old Cayman S that you guys have maybe seen on this channel before. I actually sold this vehicle several years ago. I did have the clutch and flywheel, pressure plate, all that replaced in my ownership, and this was the flywheel from that car. So what is a dual mass flywheel? Well, it is a flywheel with dual masses, as it sounds. So basically, this bolts to the crank here by these bolts here, and then the clutch is what rubs here, which is why you can see this ring here. That's exactly where the clutch pushed. And then the pressure plate pushes the clutch into the dual mass flywheel. The pressure plate is then mounted to, or splined into, rather, the input shaft of the transmission. So this is, has multiple purposes. It keeps your engine spinning because it's a big mass, and in between pulsations from each cylinder, it can allow it to continue to turn over to that next cylinder fire. And especially at lower speeds, this is important because the pulsations are fewer and further between. But it also doubles as the surface that connects the engine to the transmission, the friction surface. So let's talk about what the purpose of dual mass is. So of course you have this rotational energy from the engine. Like I said, pulsations are coming from the engine, and if you didn't have anything to dampen those pulsations, then you would feel them in the drive line. You know, as you drove along, it would feel very jerky because you would feel like basically like every individual pulsation, it would come across as vibration into your car. So the purpose of the dual mass flywheel is it can rotate like this. So, and it actually has some dampening characteristics to it. So basically this lower part here, which has the starter ring on it, this is where the starter gear hits. This is bolted directly to the engine, and so that's all part of this here. And then this upper part is actually what applies the energy into the transmission, and they can spin independently of one another so that the vibrations that are coming through this portion of the dual mass flywheel are not translated into the drive line. So it's a very nice feature for a car to have, so that you don't just feel this very raw input into your transmission, and then, you know, obviously it makes the whole car drive pretty freaking rough if this were to not be in place or functioning correctly. Given that it is a mechanical component and it does move, and that there is dampening characteristics, like I said, which means there's oil / grease inside of it, which means that there's seals inside of it, all of which can fail. The springs, the dampeners, or the dampening characteristics, all of it. So, and this flywheel was replaced because it shouldn't be moving this easily. It was, you know, it can, sorry for my clanking over there. In the case of my BMW, I'm sure it had at least this much play, and then it decided to let all of the grease loose, and it catastrophically failed inside of the bell housing. So now, instead of having any kind of dampening characteristics, it just completely hits the springs with no dampening whatsoever, and then chatters like crazy, and that's why I was feeling vibrations in the driveline. That's the background on what a dual mass flywheel is, and now it is time to replace it. Okay, so back under the car. Now, the first step, of course, is to remove the transmission. It's going to be a fairly big job and kind of annoying because all of this stuff, at least to my knowledge and according to the maintenance records of this car, this has never been out before. This is the original clutch components, flywheel components, all of that. And it's been a Midwest car all of its life for 15 years and 165,000 miles, which means that we're going to come across all sorts of stuff like these very rusted out exhaust bolts. So there's going to be all sorts of hiccups along the way. I'm expecting, I hope not, but I'm expecting there will be. And I've never done a transmission out job on a BMW before, so I'm going to learn as I go. We'll see how this all works out. Also, to add to the complication, as you can see, this is an X-drive car. There's the prop shaft going from the transfer case here up into the front differential. This does add a decent bit of complication. Not terribly so, at least I hope. But, you know, there are more things back here to disassemble to allow us to then take the transmission out. Am I excited about it? Not exactly, but it'll be really nice once it's all said and done and we can just enjoy this car for a lot longer with much fresher parts. So that'll be cool. I'm looking forward to that. All right, let's do it. Well, look at that. So all of that time lapse was just to get these 4 bolts out. There's the 4th one there. So now we just need to take the rest of the exhaust down, and then just kind of start working on taking transmission bits off. This was one of the more dreaded tasks that I was not looking forward to, so I'm pretty happy to have that done and over with. All right, well, off camera, I went ahead and took the exhaust down. Sorry I didn't show that. It wasn't all that exciting anyway. We had to do that so that we can then take this heat shield down so that we can then disconnect the prop shaft that goes from the transmission output back to the rear differential. So we're going to take that out, set it aside. By the way, there's the exhaust sitting over there. So we have to, of course, disconnect that in order to get the transmission fully loose. And then we're going to disconnect this front prop shaft. And then we'll have to disconnect all of the periphery stuff, O2 sensor, couplings, a reverse switch, the slave cylinder, and then we can begin, you know, loosening some bell housing bolts. And I've heard, thanks to the ridiculously terribly placed bolt that's at the very top of the transmission that we can't even see right now, that it will be easiest to remove the transmission mount back here so that we can kind of swing things down a little bit and get some better access to the top of that. But oh my gosh, am I dreading that. BMW, why do you do this stuff? Ain't nothing to it but to do it. So let's do it. All right, boys and girls, I'm officially exhausted. Just got done wrestling that transmission out of the 530. Here's the transmission. All right, let me tell you something. First of all, quick rant. I've worked on a lot of different cars over the years. You know, Audis, BMWs, Mercedes, all the Americans, Japanese cars. And Germans do kind of get a bad rap, honestly. They really do, because they're not all like a total pain in the butt to work on. Audis are a complete pain in the butt no matter what model, no matter whatever. Porsches are lovely to work on. They're actually very easy to work on. And BMWs are kind of somewhere in the middle. But BMWs definitely fall into the category of having like stupid, hard to reach bolts that take, you know, 3 times as long to remove than what other bolts should. Anyway, it's so frustrating. Oh, also not to mention the fact that this car is 15 years old and has 165,000 miles on it, and it's been driven in the Midwest for much of its life. So there's a lot of rust on these bolts, and I mean, you gotta frickin' fight them to get them out. So they're hard to reach and they're hard to break loose. Anyway, we got the transmission out. Let's take a look at it. So here's the transmission. As you can see, I got it sitting on my cart here. I had to put a brake rotor and a board underneath the front to account for the height difference of the X-Drive transfer case in the back there. But if you've ever wondered what it looks like inside a bell housing when your dual mass flywheel explodes, wonder no more, because this is it. All right, well, that's gonna be it for today. Transmission's out. You saw how crummy it looks when the dual mass flywheel explodes inside a bell housing. Next time we're going to pick up with taking off the pressure plate, clutch, flywheel. We'll inspect what the old parts looked like, and then we will get started with reassembling everything. So thank you so much for tuning in to FunAhead TV, and I will see you guys next time.